And it wasn't even something that my dad or mom instilled in me, but I did have this sense that that people knew who my dad was, and I could embarrass him, or I could bring shame upon the family, or or whatever. I could mess up, and it wouldn't just affect me. It would affect him, and it would and my mom, and it would make them out to be bad parents, or whatever it was. So yeah, there was a level of kind of like, I better behave at a certain point.
This is Really Famous. I'm Kara Mayer Robinson, and I interview famous people. But I don't just interview them like your typical interview. I'm not really interested in those same old questions. Instead, I like to know who they really are and what they really think. Sometimes it's like listening to old friends catching up, and other times it's like eavesdropping on a therapy session. Today, I'm having a real deal conversation with Jason Ritter. I have wanted to have Jason on the podcast for a long time. It's not just because I loved him on the TV series Parenthood, which I did, and I loved the entire show and the entire cast. Jason played Mark Sear, who started out as Amber's teacher. Amber, of course, was played by Mae Whitman, and eventually became Sarah's boyfriend. Sarah was played by Lauren Graham. Later on in the show, Sarah started dating Hank, played by Ray Romano, and it became a thing to be Team Mark or Team Hank. Love Ray Romano, but I was Team Mark all the way. Jason is also the voice of Dipper Pines, among others, on Gravity Falls. Last year, he was the star of a new TV series called Kevin Probably Saves the World, and his credits are quite extensive and include other shows like Drunk History and Another Period. And guess what? You and I are going to have something to look forward to, because Jason will be in a new show in September or thereabouts. Jason is also the son of John Ritter, who died in 2003, and we talk about him. Something else we talk about, keep this in mind for later. Right as we were setting up, I was fumbling around with my audio equipment, and I told him that I'm really, really technically challenged, and I apologized for that in advance. So now you'll know when we talk about it what we were talking about. I also explained why I've been wanting to have him as a guest on the show for a really long time. I'd like to give a big thank you to Soundbox LA, the recording studio where we taped this episode. Carson and Michelle, I appreciate you accommodating us as we did our thing. At the end of our recording, I pulled out the video camera. Well, okay, it was set up ahead of time, but we went to a different spot within the studio, and we did a fun video where he answered different questions than what we talk about on the podcast. So you won't hear it here today, so you have to go to YouTube to check it out. It's easy. Just open up YouTube and search for Really Famous. Here we are, Jason Ritter and me at Soundbox LA. First, I have to tell you that we met already.
I thought so.
But you're never going to know where.
Where was it?
Because it was this brief, and it was years ago. It was on the set of Girls.
Oh, no way.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So I'll tell you the story. So you were a guest star.
Yeah.
You were playing Shoshana's boyfriend, I guess,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
And I was writing a story for the Wall Street Journal about filming on location in New York.
Oh.
So Girls was one of the shows at the time that was filming, and so I went on set just to kind of see what was what, and there you were. So I was just kind of, yeah, it was awesome. And I have to tell you, I remember we talked for a second, like in between takes.
Yeah.
And I felt like, oh my God, you seem like the nicest guy. Like,
thanks.
Seriously?
Thanks.
So I was like, when I started a podcast, you were one of the first people who I thought of.
No
when
way.
I said who I should get on the show.
Oh my, I'm very honored. That's
so
very nice.
I don't want to be stalkerish.
No, I love that. That's so cool. That was a fun show. I love all those folks. That is so wild.
Isn't
I
that
cannot
funny?
believe that. Yeah.
And then later that night, you did a scene outside. I think it must have been outside her apartment. It was outside a door.
Oh, yes.
Like it was
Where we're,
in
like, walking
Soho.
her home. Yeah.
Yes, you're walking her home or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So that was cool. And you really stood out to me. Like I was like, I feel like there's something really good about Jason Ritter. And I have to say, like I've interviewed a lot of people, but I do think I have like kind of a good sense of character.
Yes.
And I like to get people with. Now you feel pressure to like be a perfect person.
But now I'm looking at like down the list of the people that I saw that you've interviewed already, and you have some of my absolute all-time faves in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like who?
Joe
Is it quiz?
Mantegna, Michael Ian Black, Michael Carbonaro is one of my favorites.
Really?
Yeah, I love that show, and I think he seems like such a lovely human being. He just seems so nice and just like a sort of a light. And that show is my happy place. I love watching that show.
I love to watch it.
Oh my gosh, it makes me laugh so hard.
Some of them are. There was one. I told him about it. There was one scene early on, or one. What do you call it? Like a segment. One segment where he was like, it must have been a like a kennel almost, but instead of taking dogs in and putting them,
he like
smushing them.
Yeah.
He flattened the dogs.
Yeah, they're just like, are they okay? He's like, oh yeah, and he's so good at improvising like techno babble. He's like, yeah, they dehydrate he has always some way of explaining away, and because technology moves so fast, people are like, oh, I guess I haven't heard of this yet.
They believe him.
Yeah, he's
and he thinks of it like right on the spot. I'm pretty impressed.
Yeah, it's really impressive. I really love him.
So who else? So Mantegna, you said?
Mantegna, yeah.
Joe?
He played my dad on Joan of Arcadia, and that was where I first met him, or I played his son, should say. And he just was such a lovely human being. Like I was like, how do I become like this type of a man? He's just I think he's just such a stellar example of what a person can be, just so loyal and just so wonderful and warm and just a comforting presence. And then Michael Ian Black is just one of my like comedy heroes. I think he's so funny. And we got to work together for a bit, and it was really hard to keep a straight face.
Well, what did you work on together?
We did a show together that never, it got picked up, but then they kind of didn't want to air it for whatever reason. And then we did a show called Another Period for a couple years on Comedy Central, and that was really fun.
So Another Period, was Anna Gasteyer in that as well? Or am I thinking of something else? Who was in that?
Let's see.
Was Kate Flannery?
Kate Flannery came in and did some. It was Ricky Lindholm and Natasha Leggero are the two creators and writers, and they star in it. And then there was a lot of people came and went. Yeah.
So Michael Ian Black is one of those people who is so funny and yet so serious.
Oh yeah, his deadpan. It's true.
I think a lot of comedians are very serious.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them aren't, but a lot of them are. It's such a weird thing because you kind of feel like you're just going to laugh as soon as you see them.
Yeah, exactly.
But then it's like
hello.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to kind of prepare yourself for it.
Yeah.
So Parenthood, obviously we have to talk about it because and I know you probably, are you tired of it now?
No, not at all.
Not even slightly?
Not even slightly. That was one of the greatest experiences of my life. It was like, it really did feel like a family. It felt like, especially for a network TV show, it felt like the most creatively free. Sometimes there can be so many kind of cooks in the TV world that it's like every word has been decided and approved ahead of time. Your look has been, you have to do a certain thing, and we really had so much input as actors, and it felt nice. It really felt like the collaborative experience that like usually only I've experienced in independent movies where we have the freedom to try things and not as much as at stake. But a lot of times when there's that much money involved, people want to micromanage and things like that, and you can lose some of the freedom. But we just had incredible leaders, and it was just such a wonderful time. I loved it.
Yeah, well, it was a wonderful time for all the rest of us too, just so you know. Like, it was such a great show.
Yeah.
I always put it in when people ask me, like, what some of my all-time favorites are. Parenthood, without pause, gets thrown into the top 5.
Everybody was so wonderful on that show, and the writing was so good, and it was funny, but then also, I don't think I ever made it through a whole episode without getting a little teary-eyed. It was such a beautiful show. I felt extremely lucky to be a part of it.
Yeah, and you know what? Also, I agree about the emotions and the teary-eyed, but it wasn't like they were telling us how we should feel.
No.
It would kind of it may come up, like a tear might come up for you at a different moment that it would come up for me, I feel like. Oh,
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that was one of the things. The times that really, like, made me the most emotional were just, like, someone doing something nice for one of their family members unexpectedly, or, you know, just some sort of life is beautiful, people can be kind to each other type of moment. Some of the sadder things didn't get me as much. I mean, the, you know, quote unquote sadder things. But, like, some thing of, like, a minor triumph in one of their lives, or someone shows up to something that the other, you know, that someone wanted them to be there for, or whatever it was. It really was surprising every time.
Yeah, and it was such a good family, and they were all flawed. Every single character. These were real people. Yeah. I know they weren't.
No, but
they were.
Yeah.
And so I could compare it to other shows. I'm not going to, but I will without mentioning any other shows. But I do feel like they were much more realistic people, humans. And that was part of what made it so great.
Yeah, no, like, heroes and villains, or, you know, it was just like all people, all with varying flaws. Yeah, and I think that was what allowed us to kind of get emotional and get emotionally invested, at least, is that I don't know, when you see a character on TV and they're just a perfect human being, you kind of don't connect with them as much, unless you're like a sociopath and you think you're perfect. But I think we identify with people who have flaws and who are just trying their best, and, you know, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step, you know, that feels like, that feels like reality. And they did, I think that show did a great job of blending, like, comedy and drama in the way that also feels to me like life, where something devastating happens and then you're laughing really hard the next day, and it's so bizarre and doesn't feel like that's how it should be, but that's how I experience life. Is some of the hardest times I've laughed ever are like the hardest, you know, in the hardest moments. So I love that it was all kind of inclusive, and it wasn't like, you know, let's cut out the comedy for this moment because it needs to be dead serious. It was always sort of, it was, I loved it.
I love that too, and I don't think that many television shows did that a long time ago. Now, Parenthood's not that long ago.
No, but
but it was like, I feel like was a point where, like, it started to mix in a little comedy and drama, and that's so much more realistic.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that the movie did such a great job of, the movie Parenthood.
Yes,
I loved that movie. It was one of my favorite movies growing up, and it had a similar feeling where it is as funny as any comedy, and as wild and broad, too. And then also so incredibly moving, and I thought the show really captured the spirit of that.
That is so true. And I was forgetting all about that movie, but you're right, it did. Yeah. In fact, I remember I used to ask people, like, for fun, like, so it must have been a long time ago, like, which do you think reflects reality more? Sitcoms or dramas? Because neither one really did.
Yeah.
And both of them kind of did.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have different things. I mean, there have definitely been times where I've, you know, felt like I was in the middle of some kind of sitcom, but, you know, the thing about sitcoms is usually most of it is sort of resolved by the end of the episode, and it's just so I mean, generally I would say dramas, but then like we were talking about before, I feel like there's generally more humor. I mean, it would be tough to be living in a world where everybody is just steely and, you know, cool and tough and all that kind of, you know, drama stuff that you see.
Yeah, I don't think I want to live in that world. If I had a choice, I would rather live on one of those sitcom couches.
Yeah, no, for sure. It definitely seems more fun.
Right. So, what was your childhood like?
When I look back, I was a little bit hyper. I don't know. I've been reading a lot about like ADHD and stuff like that, and I go, oh, I think maybe that was a thing that I had. It sounds exactly like sort of how I was. I was sort of a little restless in class. I loved school. I loved learning. I loved all of that kind of stuff, but I was a little bit disruptive, and sometimes I think back and I go, it's a little loud and annoying. I hope people that I went to school with aren't like, oh, this guy. But yeah, I mean, Wait,
back up. So when did you start realizing like, oh my gosh, I wonder if I had ADHD?
Actually, well, there was a thread on Twitter that went around. I mean, I've gone to my whole life. I've gone to, you know, I've always wanted to understand myself more. I've always wanted to understand the world more, and just also learn as much as I can about people and humanity. And I'm the closest person that I know that I can sort of delve into, you know, I can delve into my own brain. So I've gone to a lot of therapy and psychiatrists, and I've had people mention that, and I've always had some kind of strange aversion, like, no, I don't have that. I don't, you know, I'm fine. I can, you know, I'll just power through. And then I read a thread on Twitter like a couple days ago. I've even taken medication for ADHD, and then I was like, I don't really like the way it makes me feel, and I've just gone off of it. And but then I read this thread on Twitter that sort of went through kind of what it's like, and it was one of those moments where I was like, this is exactly, you know, things that I had sort of put off as just, you know, I have a hard time focusing, or, you know, I focus on things that I really like, and then if it doesn't sort of click into my brain, it's hard for me to, you know, I just sort of shut off. Yeah, so I think that was a big moment for me, and it's such a wonderful thing in the world now that we have this period of time where people are sharing difficult and painful things about their lives, because they're all the things that we kind of, even just something as simple as ADHD, or, you know, or any kind of anything, we're sort of, there's a part of us that wants to just be like super normal and just appear normal to everyone, not have anything weird or any traumas from our past. And it's so incredible that people are talking about it and kind of getting rid of whatever strange stigma you have in your brain about all of the not normal things about you or that happened to you or things like that. So it makes it much less lonely and more like you could see yourself and other people and like recognize that, oh, okay, this is a thing. Yeah, this is just exactly. It's but it's interesting to me that, so you've even been on medication for it, but it never really clicked for you. So did none of your therapists actually explained? Well, I mean, they kind of, and I mean, I have to say, when I was on some of the medication, I felt more focused, and I felt like and I did some more tasks and things like that. But I think there was a part of me that, it's an interesting thing. I've talked to a lot of people who have different medications, and there's this feeling of like, it's like, for me, it felt like I had this crutch, the medication, and helped me. I could go do stuff faster and all these things, and then I go, oh wow, look at how great I'm doing. I don't need this anymore, and then I just fall over. That's like the experience. That is so like textbook or whatever. Yeah, exactly. So I started to feel better. I was like, look at me, I'm focusing more and stuff like that. And then I was like, well, I don't want to be on medication, whatever that thing is. I have no judgments about people on medication, but it's just funny how much or at least for me, how much harsher I am on myself than anybody else in the world. If someone had ADHD and they went on medication, I would not have a second thought about like, oh wow, you're really like leaning on something. But for me, I'm like have this strange thing of, I want to do it, by myself. But reading that thread made me think, well, maybe I'll try that again.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll try a different one that doesn't make me feel like I'll be awake for 3 days.
Right, and that's sometimes what happens is you need to try the different ones, and you don't know right away either how it's going to work for you because every body is different.
Exactly.
So it's still as an adult then you kind of see some of that. So it wasn't just a childhood thing.
No, it wasn't just a childhood thing. It was more of an adult thing. And then, there was a lady who came up to me and said, I saw you at a restaurant when you were 4 or something like that. I guess because she recognized my dad, and so she didn't know like my name or anything, but apparently she saw my dad and my family at a restaurant, and she basically, I don't know why she came up and told me this, but she said, yeah, I saw you at this restaurant. You were about 3 or 4 and you were just a little nightmare.
Oh,
you were just like running all around the place and being loud, and I was like, oh, sorry, and then so yeah, and I do remember there was like a little bit of extra energy that I had sometimes, but I did think it was weird to have someone say, hey, you were not a great 4-year-old, just so you know.
So, but aren't people weird with like celebrities? They just come and say whatever. But I almost feel like I'm thinking to myself, like I probably was saying something almost similar, not bad about you, but I was telling you the second you walked in, like, oh, we met already.
No, but I think I think like that's a lovely thing, and that's also a very nice thing. The strange thing was, if she hadn't recognized my dad, she would have forgotten the next day.
Yes.
She would have been like, there was a nightmare kid in the restaurant somewhere. But because my dad was there, she always, I guess she had kept in her head this thing of like, that guy's kid is a nightmare.
Yes.
And I'll hold this in my brain for 30 years.
That is great. So when you think about it, like you've never not been in the spotlight then too. I mean, you probably didn't realize it when you were younger.
Yeah, I didn't realize. I mean, at a certain point I started to realize that like that there was some sort of context and it wasn't even something that my dad or mom instilled in me, but I did have this sense that people knew who my dad was, and I could embarrass him, or I could bring shame upon the family, or or whatever. I could mess up, and it wouldn't just affect me. It would affect him, and it would and my mom, and it would make them out to be bad parents, or whatever it was. So yeah, there was a level of kind of like, I better behave at a certain point.
That's a lot of pressure.
It did, yeah. It did feel a little bit like, I mean, I definitely, any sort of acting out I did, I tried to make sure I never got in trouble or caught or
like always.
For a long time. I mean, I still feel like a little bit of some kind of pressure to appear a certain way, and parts of my personality to like kind of hide away, but like just like we were talking before. But I think I've gotten better at just sort of talking about my things, and then letting people judge or not judge, or do whatever.
Yeah.
It feels nice to kind of not try to pretend I'm something else. And I don't think it's at the end of the day, I don't think it's helpful to pretend you're something else.
Right.
There are people that I idolized growing up, and the more I got to learn about them, the more human they became. But I initially was sort of like, you just have to be this sort of perfect person, and then you make it to the end of your life, and then people go, what a perfect person that was, and that's all, and you inspire people to to be better or something like that. And then what it does is when you don't share things that you're struggling with, people who then are struggling with something go, well, so I guess I can never get to some certain state of perfectness or whatever, and it's much easier to go, no, it's all a struggle, and you just kind of slowly try to bend the arc towards, learning more and bettering yourself and being a better human being to people. And yeah.
But also, don't you think, I personally feel like a person is more likable actually when they're a human, when they have like flaws, and not even flaws, just real layers, I guess. I'm like, that flaws is the wrong word. It's just when they're really a person. It's like bothers me a little bit when I feel like somebody, it's part of my thing too, is like when I see an image that I feel like, oh, this is an image.
Oh yeah.
I want to know the person because that's a better person to me.
For sure. That's always like a huge red flag for me when I meet someone and they are presenting this sort of thing of everything's great and I'm great and I'm wonderful. I'm always more put at ease when someone says, I don't really know what I'm doing. Something like that. I'm like
me with the technical stuff, which I said at the beginning.
It's true. Yeah, exactly.
I already called myself out to tell you how bad I am at this stuff.
Well, and then you did it perfectly. I'd rather have that than go, I am the most technically proficient person you've ever met, and then you fumble around. And I'm like, this person lied to me.
Exactly.
I'd rather...
Do you feel like you can see it right off the bat if somebody's presenting, even if they don't say, oh, I'm really good at this? Do you feel like you can pick up on it?
Generally, yeah. That's like, I feel like usually those people give themselves away pretty quick. Although not always. Sometimes you can know someone for like decades and be like, why is it always a little bit, why do I always feel a little strange around them? And then you go, oh, this is it. And it's not to blame those people. Some of them are so scared of showing any weakness or any kind of like, crack in their armor or facade that they've built up, that they need that. They need that because they feel like, I won't be loved or I won't be worthy of people liking me if I'm not this other thing. And then some people really appreciate that and enjoy that. But for me, my closest friends and the people in my life are all people who are, we over talk about our difficulties.
But isn't that funny? It's so interesting. I knew I was going to like you in a conversation for real. More than just on the set of Girls. But because you're very, you analyze things.
I do.
You're very insightful.
I overdo it. Oh, thank you.
But I like to analyze things too, obviously. Yeah. So that's good.
Okay, good.
Isn't it interesting, something you said before about how sometimes you realize every time you're with one person, you don't feel great. What is that about? But it's interesting because I think it takes a while to realize that it's every time you're with this person, and then that must have something to do with what's going on for that person, and it's not reflective on you.
Yeah.
Of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And also sometimes, like, there are just people who kind of, we hear about it in when people are trying to be, when I first heard this phrase, I thought it was like people not wanting to tell the truth about their divorce, but irreconcilable differences.
Yeah.
But that's a real thing, and that can also happen with friends or people, you're just like, oh, wow, we're just actually different, and I think you need something more than I need, or, and one of the big sort of red flags for me, again, and this is just personally, but like, unless I've been a completely ridiculous person, if someone is ever like embarrassed by me or something like that, then that makes me nervous, because then it's like, you wanted me to be something that in order to make strangers, and again, if I was like putting on weird hats and like playing a trumpet in a restaurant, then that's embarrassing, and I deserve it. But if I just generally was trying to be myself and things like that, and it's a thing where you go, well, I don't want to embarrass you anymore, and you probably don't want to be embarrassed, and so let's go our separate ways.
Right. So has that happened? Somebody's been embarrassed by you?
Yeah, that's happened, and I've also, I've felt embarrassed by people. It goes both ways, but I definitely have. I've been. Well, I've been embarrassing as well. I've been more embarrassing.
How have you been embarrassing? I don't see it.
Oh, well, I think before I stopped drinking, I would get I never got aggressive, but I got loud sometimes, and I got a little. I broke some stuff that I shouldn't have, I would just not be paying attention and gesture wildly and, knock something over or something like that. And so that was something that I was like, okay, I don't want to keep embarrassing myself like that. And even if people, at that point, the people that I was around, my closest friends, were like, they always had my back and were like, it wasn't that bad. When I would call them up and be like, oh, was I to this or to that? And they're like, no, you're fine. But for me, I was left with a feeling that I didn't really like. And so yeah, when I stopped drinking, felt a little bit better for me to feel like I was in a little bit of control of how I was representing myself to the people around me that I met.
Yeah, that's more of that awareness again, of you're always aware of yourself and how other people, how you impact or affect other people based on your own.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So,
doing a lot of analyzing like that and overanalyzing, but then going, I think I'm actually the person who's making me unhappier now. So what can I change?
When did you stop drinking, and how much drinking were you doing? Like, how long was that?
I drank, I had my first little drink some point in high school. I know that's illegal, and I don't recommend it to any children who are listening. But
this is the Jason monitoring himself.
Yeah, exactly. But I in college, I always, it was a way, I think I was always a little bit, I've always had these sort of two warring personalities. When I get to know someone, I kind of open up, or at least this is how I sort of used to operate, and I would be really like wild and crazy, and then in another situation I could be the most shy, sort of anxiety-ridden person. And so initially I believed that alcohol was helping me like loosen up or something at a party and not make me nervous to talk to people and not be nervous to start a conversation, and again it was like it was just something that I sort of always had kind of leaned on, and I sort of felt like I needed it in a strange way, and I knew about alcoholism, and sometimes I would be telling like my crazy party stories to someone who had gone through the program, and they would be like, "Wow, all right, well, that's those aren't the most normal stories. If you ever want a seat at the meeting, you can have one." And then at a certain point, I just sort of, again, I'm always trying to kind of, for myself and for the people around me, minimize pain and maximize sort of nicer feelings. And I just was feeling like I was causing a lot more sort of pain for myself and for people around me, and most of the things that I felt sort of badly about. And that's another thing, is like I remember every single like misstep of my life. Like they'll come back and haunt things that I said in preschool or things like that, just like
like at the restaurant even.
Yeah, or like that. Yeah, I mean, that's one that I had to add to the list because I didn't remember that. Yeah. Right. But I'll go back and think of these things and go, oh, why did I do that? I wish I could just go back and change it over. And so, when I decided to stop doing it, a lot of my friends were sort of surprised, and because they hadn't sort of identified me as a problem drinker or whatever, but I didn't want to wait until it got to that point for me. I could sort of see that it was not making me happy, and I was like, and I also, initially, I felt like I can always go back to drinking. I don't know what it's like to not drink for a while. I haven't been, I haven't not had a drink in a long time. So, so I started to do it, and I didn't quite know how long it would go, and now it's been like over 5 years or something like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks.
That's a really long time, and that's amazing. So you went in with kind of low stakes in a way, saying you could always go back to it.
Yeah. I mean, I think
it's working for you.
Yeah. And that was a weird, I was like holding on to like some kind of life preserver. It was too scary to say, I'll never do it again. Yeah. And then, and that, like, the thing one day at a time that they all say, I never quite understood it. It's just certain things become kind of cliches by the time they reach your ears, and you go, oh yeah, one day at a time, yeah, I get it. But when someone sort of explained it to me, like, I'm there, like, I can't even promise you tomorrow, but I can get to my bed tonight without having a drink, and I'll just do this one day. I was like, oh, that's what that means. It's literally, one day, you're just doing this one day over and over and over and over again. And then the longer you sort of go, the stranger it is to, the weirder it feels to kind of break it. Like, there have been times where some idea will creep back in. Everyone's like having champagne and it's like some big celebration. I'm like, oh, is tonight the night that I break it? And then I'm like, what? Well, not drinking has made me this much happier up to this point. So what's so special about tonight that I want to like break my little run? Because it was hard initially to get to the 3-month mark. That was like the hardest time for some reason, because it was always like, oh, just start over. I can just, it's been 5 days. All right, I'll start over and I can get back to 5 days in 5 days. But you can do that over and over again, but it's not so easy to get back to 5 years, if you
Yes.
So
what did you do? Did you go into AA?
I started going to some meetings but then there was also that part of me that was like, I just want to do it by myself. So, but the meetings really did help, and it was interesting because initially I went into the meetings and I was like, whoa, I don't recognize this. This doesn't sound like my experience of this at all. Maybe I'm not an alcoholic. Maybe I never felt like an alcoholic. It was hard for me to even say that word, but then also I was there and I was not happy with my drinking. So when I first went in, it was, when going through the steps, there was this weird thing where I was sort of like kind of skipping around and like, okay, yes, I can admit that I'm at least to some degree powerless. I'm here, so to
some degree.
Yeah, to some degree. So all right, yeah, fine. But there were some things that initially I just was like, I don't know if I'm gonna go through all these steps and do all that kind of stuff, and I was just like, we'll see. Let me just focus on these first couple for right now. And then there was this guy who was so amazing, who he had this big beard, And he was like, yeah, he's like, the steps are like, it's like a cake. And the first time I tried to do the steps, I was like, oh, I don't have flour, but I have a cement mixer. Maybe that'll work. And but it's not a good cake. So you just gotta follow the recipe, and it'll be a good cake.
That's a good analogy. You do not want that cement cake.
You do not want that cement. But it also is funny because it's how it was like. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's also how so much of the time I've thought about things, and I'm like, well, I can. Here's the thing that everyone says works, but I'll do my own way, and this cement mix looks enough like flour. Let's see. But yeah, but it's been an amazing little journey, and I'm always excited to see what the next journey is.
I think there will be a lot more journeys for you, I feel like.
I think so.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So are you engaged right now?
I am engaged, yes.
To Melanie Linsky?
To Melanie Linsky, yes.
Okay, so congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And you had a baby too, right?
And we had a baby too, yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
A little girl?
A little girl, yeah.
So I did a little bit of research without going too far so that I know everything about, your baby is this way or that way because of her famous father, you know what I mean?
Right, exactly, yeah.
But she's probably going to have a similar thing to you in that way.
Yeah, I guess she could. I mean,
right?
Yeah, I mean, I think though the entertainment business in general has changed so much. I feel like, when like my dad was on TV, there weren't that many channels, so many people knew, not to say that they wouldn't have watched or something like that, but there were just less choices. There's so much more content out there that to get to the level of that, where we would be walking down the street and people would come up and do that kind of thing. And unless you're like Tom Cruise or some, huge.
Yeah, but there are fewer Tom Cruises now. I think you're right.
Yeah, it's sort of that like big, huge star thing is sort of changed a little bit. There's so many different people and they kind of come and go, and but yeah, I mean, she'll probably have some sort of experience,
right?
Like
but
that.
Probably a little less of the pressure than you did. Everybody knew John Ritter then,
right?
You're right. Everybody watched Three's Company.
Yeah,
that was a fact.
Yeah, exactly.
And now there are so many shows, but I think maybe Parenthood would come relatively close.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, because in the numbers that people watch. But it's not the same thing. I think you're right. It's spread out more. Yeah,
it's a little bit spread out, and you're totally right. I mean, there are shows that have gotten are incredibly successful. It's just harder to get to that point. There's so much more competition that you can have. There are many brilliant TV shows that are like barely treading water, but there's certainly some shows that are still at worldwide huge hits. I mean, Game of Thrones, or
But even Game of Thrones, that's everybody's favorite show. It feels like, except mine.
I know, I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it ever?
I saw 2 episodes, and I was trying to figure out what was going on. And the first time I watched an episode, my friend who was watching it, he kept on pausing and saying, "Okay, so that's this guy, and this is the king, and blah blah." And then at a certain point, 5 minutes in, he paused and he took a deep breath and he went, "Do you mind if I just watch it? I don't want." And I was like, "Yeah, I wasn't following anyway, so just have fun. I'm gonna go to the other room."
Totally. I tried 1 episode of it and I didn't even make it to the end. I was like, I just cannot. This is just not gonna connect for me, or whatever.
Maybe one day.
This is what I'm saying. So Game of Thrones, even though that's like the huge show that like everybody except you and I call their favorite show,
exactly.
Still. Not everybody watches it and knows it. I can't tell you the names of the people in it. How about that? And this is what I do for a living.
Right, yeah.
But I don't even know who the actors are in it.
Well, that's the thing. There's so many other great TV shows that it's not like, you can get through the day. You can get through the day at work without having seen the latest Game of Thrones. You can talk about whatever show you were just watching, and you're not like, oh, this is the one thing that everybody's talking about. But yeah, One day maybe I'll make it through Game of Thrones.
What do you watch?
Oh gosh, I watch a lot of documentaries. A lot of like, and I don't mean to sound fancy. A lot of them are like just like
crime, like
yeah,
murders.
True crime. Yeah, I watch a lot of that stuff. But let's see, what other TV shows do I watch? Well, I watch The Carbonaro Effect. Melanie got me into The Bachelor pretty heavily, so I'm in I watch all of those. I never thought I would, but there I am, just deep in it. Bachelor,
so
Bachelorette,
funny.
Bachelor in Paradise. It's just like, they all tie in with each other, and it was
on last night, I think, right?
It was on last night.
Because I don't watch The Bachelor. I never do. I think I might have watched one season of The Bachelorette, the first one ever. I feel like I might have seen. I never watch it. So many people say that's their guilty pleasure. But I'm staying with a friend this week in LA, and she watches it.
Oh, really?
So there I am, like catching up on emails last night on the couch, and there's The Bachelor going on. I'm like, oh, this show is really something else.
I mean, it does make a certain amount of sense that I watch true crime and The Bachelor, because they're both filled with like extremely like emotional, you know, like there's something, even though the whole thing of The Bachelor is like a fake reality show. I mean, it's a real reality show, but you know, they get these people to go to these beautiful places, and they really do get their emotions involved. You know, they're like skydiving, and they're doing all these things. Their adrenaline and their oxytocin is like pumping, and they're like, this is my dream. And then it's all just like, it's just slowly falls apart, and people are weeping, and it's so serious, and it's like a weird social experiment.
That's right. It kind of is, because I feel like a lot of it's probably fake, right?
I'm sure a lot of it is like, especially in the first couple episodes, or like, you know, they have connections or they don't. There's going to be like a villain. There's going to be like people infighting and stuff. But when it gets down to the final couple of people, it does seem to be that the person has had a connection with all of them. And the idea that you have to send one of them home, and, you know, you've created this bizarre social experiment where these people, they all say like, I'm in love with 3 people, you know, like, and usually you wouldn't be able to get away with that. Be like, oh, that was a lovely date. So you know that I'm going on the same kind of date with 5 other people, and we're all just pretending this is cool.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But you're right, but you put all that in, and it could create those, like, it's almost like a petri dish.
Yeah, it really is. Like you put in 20-something people, and you're like, here's some wine and some fireworks, and you're in France, and you just saw like a beautiful, you know, band that you've just heard about. And yeah, it's so I do watch that. And what are some of the I watched The Walking Dead. That's one that I've been watching since the beginning.
Okay, so Walking Dead. So I think you thought of enough. I won't put you on the spot to think of more, but I could talk about that a long time. So I'll talk about another show that brings it back to Melanie, Togetherness.
Oh yeah! Oh my gosh!
I was so bummed that they canceled. That was one of the good shows.
It was one of the best shows.
So just for everybody who doesn't know, it was on HBO. I think for maybe 2 seasons.
2 seasons. 2 seasons
only, like maybe 2 or 3 years ago or something like that.
And it was so good. It was so good. It was beautiful. I mean, it did kind of what we were talking about at the beginning. It was really funny, and also there were like moving moments, but also all the actors were just like unbelievable on it. I mean, Amanda Peet and Steve Zissou and Mark Duplass and Melanie. It was just like, everyone was amazing, and it was I really would have loved to see a third season.
Yes, right?
I was like so ready.
It was really begging for one. It was not right.
It wasn't right. There's so many shows that end before their time, and that was definitely one of them.
So another thing that I wanted to talk to you about Melanie is that, does she have misophonia? Do you know what
I'm talking about? She does have misophonia, yeah.
I saw an article about it. It is so funny because my family makes such fun of me.
Okay.
My husband cracks up it. So I didn't know anything about it. Never heard of it. One day my husband sends me this email, and he says, look at this link, you have this. So I clicked on the link, and it was like a small little article about misophonia.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, I have that.
Yes.
But like only a little bit, I think.
Yes.
I think it goes extreme.
It can go extreme, but
and then I think I remember reading an article. It was when Togetherness was out, and she must have said that, like, she must have been interviewed about having, or she mentioned having misophonia, which, can you describe it for everybody?
So, misophonia or misophonia?
Misophonia.
Well, I actually don't know.
It's probably
should look
misophonia, it up. But they make fun of me, and they this is really ridiculous. But what they said, I mean, my husband and my kids have picked up on it. Misophonia, meaning like it's
a made up thing. Yeah, yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the things. I feel like Melanie and her family, because they all sort of have it.
They do?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are not believed sort of about it, like, and or teased about it, and are like, you're being sensitive.
Sounds
that's ridiculous. But what it is basically is that mouth sounds, like chewing sounds, or, you know, if someone's eating with their mouth open, the kind of mouth smacking sounds that I'm like, especially on podcasts, I always am like, now I'm trying to not, you know, I'm trying to have a lot of water, as not that dry mouth thing, and but yeah, those sounds drive them like crazy, to the point where it's hard to think about something else when, I mean, Melanie can hear it like across a restaurant. You know, we'll be eating, and she'll sort of freeze, and her eyes will go big, and I'll go, what's going on? And she'll be like, you know, across the room, back corner, there's a bad eater.
I get it.
Yeah, but it's kind of like one of those things where that we were talking about earlier, where once you sort of say these things out loud, you know, Melanie and her whole family remember the first time they got an article. They read an article about it, and they're like, it's a real thing.
Yes.
We have this, you know. And then I mentioned it on a talk show at some point, and then, you know, there was like the misophonia community was like, thank you for, you know, it was like,
oh yeah.
But also people who know about it are like, why is my boyfriend making fun of me, you know, or saying I'm too sensitive, or my girlfriend, or whatever. But then on the other hand, there's so many people who just have had this thing their whole lives, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, relax, you know, I'm sorry I ate with my mouth open for 1 second. But then they hear this, and they're like, it's not my fault.
Yeah, it's so fun. I just didn't even know it was a thing. And I think it's like I won't hear it across the room, but put me in a movie theater.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm really going to have an issue with the popcorn eaters, and everybody else can't do it. Yeah. Or like gum chewing. Can't even be in the room with somebody who's chewing gum.
Oh, yeah.
Hate it.
No, and it's interesting because it's something that I don't have, but since I've started to become more attuned to it, like there was a time where I was working on something, and one of the cameramen just was like chomping gum, and all of a sudden I couldn't concentrate in the scene because I just was like hearing this bizarre thing. It didn't drive me crazy, but I could just hear it.
Yeah, you noticed
it was sort of like white noise before. It just sort of. But yeah, we have to be very, you know, when we go to the movies, we look at the seating charts, and we're like, this looks like an isolated area in the back corner. We try to like stay as far away from, you know, people as possible. And we've moved seats a couple of times if there's a real bad popcorn eater.
I feel that.
Yeah.
I do.
Now they have, like, not only can you eat, but you can basically, like, lie down in the theater and take a nap. There's, like, those theaters where you can, like, put your seat all the way back and have a blanket. Like, I have 15 minutes to take a nap while something's playing in the...
That's right. Somebody was telling me about the same thing with, like, I think they bring blankets or something. Wait, are you saying that there are blankets at the theater?
I'm not sure. Maybe that would be too much, but I know they don't.
But I know somebody who brings blankets. He and his wife bring blankets to the theater.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know.
Like, wait, that is not right.
Make ourselves comfy like we're at our home.
Right.
Yeah, I know. I feel like a lot of the blanket people also bring their own snacks, and I've also, like, you know, I had a family, you know, sometimes my mom would bring like a little plastic bag filled of whatever it was, and I just remember still it feeling so nervous, like we're like going through the airport with like a kilo of cocaine or something like that. I'm just like, what if they search you and they find the goldfish in the plastic bag? Right. We're not allowed to have that here. We need to have, it says no outside food. That always makes me so nervous, even though I've never seen anybody like, sir, where'd you get that baggie from? That doesn't look like official movie.
Exactly, you're food. Right. That is out. Clearly, it's clear. It clearly came from home. You're not welcome here. But that's true. So I'm just getting again, I have to give you a little feedback. Like, definitely, for sure, you always watch yourself. Like, you are not like you've never been a reckless human being.
The recklessness, I think, came from being so sort of tightly wound. I mean, I remember that like my brother and my sister, Carly and Tyler, who are both two of the most incredible people, when the three of us were growing up, they remember that like my catchphrase that I would always demand of them, even they're like 2 or whatever, and I'm like 5.
Oh, so you're the oldest?
I'm the oldest, yeah. So my sister's 2 below me, and my brother's 3 below her. So he's 5 years younger than me. But I would just be like, pay attention. You know, they'd be like walking and they'd bump into a stranger, and I'd be like, I'm so sorry, sir. Carly, just focus. You have to like be aware of your in like a really intense way. I feel very bad about it now. But yeah, that was always a thing where I was like, your actions have repercussions, so you have to constantly. It was like, you know, I had heard the golden rule, you know, do unto others, like, and like taken it to the nth degree, where it was like, dude, would you like to be bumped into? No, exactly. So don't bump into anybody. Never make any mistakes. And, you know, this sort of thing where a while I was sort of obsessed with getting things like perfect and all these things. And I think that was something that the alcohol initially kind of released in me. It was like, oh, a mess. Oh, I love a mess. I love, you know, imperfection, and all of the art that I liked and all the music that I liked was the less sort of polished stuff, the sort of, you know, the like a
little grittier.
Yeah, a little grittier, or a little, you know, if there was like a mistake, or, you know, the singer didn't exactly hit the note, or the guitar was messy and weird, it was like, well, that you can't recreate. I always felt like this weird thing, like you can recreate perfection. A robot can like recreate perfection, but the imperfections are what make us human. And if you stumble, or you know, or your voice cracks in a moment when you're supposed to do it, it's really hard to reproduce that human mess part. And so I love that in art and in music, but for myself, I was like, that's not okay. You have to just try to.
Yeah, but a human could never be perfect.
Exactly.
Never.
No, and I think that, you know, as I grew up, I really had to, you know, not only like let go of trying to be perfect, but also not rail against perfection so hard that I become a horrible awful nightmare.
You go off
you know,
the deep end.
Just be like, like a happy medium of like, you know, I try hard and I don't always get there, but
yeah, it's called balance, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So where did that come from? Do you think? Like, where did that develop? Was that kind of passed down? Is it from your parents, or did you think that was like a firstborn kind of issue? Or
I think it was a firstborn kind of issue. Yeah, I mean. My dad was really, you know, funny and, you know, goofy, and my mom was also really fun and lovely and warm, and, you know, like so I don't exactly know where that came from. There was like a little, my dad would definitely like, you know, I would get my report card and it would be like all A's, and there'd be like a B+, and he'd be like, what happened here? Not in like a horrible, like strict way, but he would just be like, why, was something going on? Like, I'd be like, that's a B+. So there was an element of, I don't know, I think the other thing that happened, and I don't know if it was from my parents or from my teachers, but there was always the word potential. They would just, people always would tell me that I had a lot of potential, that I had but instead of that being an exciting and an invigorating and a like an inspiring thing, I can do anything, I can really like reach for the stars, to me it became this sort of strange pressure, like here's this currency that can only be wasted. You know, you can
only go down.
Yeah, you can like
to not meet it.
Yeah, everything that you do that is not an attempt to reach your top potential is a waste. And you know, like if you don't take this day and you make it your fullest, then your top potential has gone down 1 degree and will continue going down 1 degree, and or something like it's this weird brutal thing that I only sort of like, I don't know why that went into my brain like that, but
well, that's common, by the way.
Oh, really?
Right.
Yeah.
So questions. Number one, why did they always tell you have a lot of potential, do you think? What was it in you that they were did they give you feedback about what they were seeing?
I mean, I was good in class. I was, you know, math sort of, especially like the math and sciences, that came easy to me for some reason. There was always one answer and you just like figure out eventually, you know, what it is, and then you get the answer. Whereas English and history were a little bit tougher for my brain to sort of latch onto. But in kindergarten and preschool and all those things where you're learning the alphabet and it's just all like one answer as opposed to like complicated, you know, complex thoughts, I was nailing it. I learned the alphabet like that.
Were you like put in gifted education or something?
I was always a year or so ahead in math.
Oh,
from
so they
like
advanced
elementary
you
school
specifically?
to, yeah, there was like it's kind of funny there were these like, we had these little math booklets, and there was like the main class, and there was there was like sort of a section for kids who was having a little bit more trouble with it, and then for me the math books were fun, and so I just like went through and I kept on just filling them in and handing them back in until I eventually got into the sort of like advanced one that had the booklets were a little longer and a little bit more complicated questions, but it was always sort of relaxing to me in a way that was pretty infuriating to most of my friends.
Yes.
But so I think it was that initially, and yeah, I don't know exactly what it was that people said that to, why people said that to me. Well, you were smart.
You were a smart kid.
Yeah, and also people were giving me the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's just people say that to lots of kids, but
I don't think so.
I mean.
But look, you said that they said that to you, and automatically my question was, were you in gifted classes? And you were, and that look, you were skipped ahead, because I don't think that everybody just throws that out to kids normally.
No, that's true.
It's okay to own that, like, there was something special about you, okay?
I was really good at adding together quarters and nickels and dimes and figuring out
minimize it if you must.
No, I think that's true. But it was that word potential that made the word disappointing so powerful to me too.
Well, I'm going to explain it to you from a different perspective. One of my kids has a very high IQ. So it was always a problem for him in school because it wasn't a match. Like, what was going on at school wasn't really a match for what he was interested in.
Yeah.
So it was like he couldn't really connect with it, I guess. Not that he couldn't, but he just wasn't interested.
Yeah, for sure. So
I remember doing a lot of research on high potentials, what they call it now, high potential kids, students. And one of the biggest problems is that the environment doesn't match. But one of the things you have to look out for as a parent, and you may have this for your daughter someday, so you can bank that now, they tell you, be aware of the term potential and don't use it much.
Really?
Yes, that was a thing. That's why when you said it, I wasn't surprised at all, because I have heard this before. It is a thing, and it can be very detrimental to the child, even though people think, like adults think, this is a good thing that you're saying about your child or your student or whatever else. It's like, seems like a very positive thing, but actually it's more common for that to be difficult.
That's really wild. That's amazing. I mean, It's funny. It's always felt sort of embarrassing to have it, because I know there are lots of kids who grow up and aren't told those like things that are, you know, like you're special or you're, you know, and I'm so impressed every time I hear someone who's like just fought their way through none of the support to like get to where they are. And it always just felt a little embarrassing that, you know, it felt like you know, that this big gift was sort of given to me, and I was like, oh, it's scary.
Yeah.
You know.
But isn't that interesting? Because it's like, either way, whatever way you grow up or whatever your conditions are, there are struggles.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, whether you're privileged or underprivileged or whatever gifts you're given or not given.
Yeah.
There's a flip side of everything.
I guess that was also one of the things, is that I was always aware to some degree of my privilege, and like one of the things that we would, not necessarily that word, but both my dad and mom always were like, we're so lucky, you know, Dad got to do what he loves and make money at it, and you know, we're very lucky. There are people who are incredibly talented who don't have the same opportunities and things like that. And so I was always sort of aware of like this thing, and and then it was strange to have any kind of, you know, dissatisfaction or have any kind of problem when we were so lucky in so many ways. Mm-hmm. Even you know, like my parents got divorced, or even like much heavier things, like when my father passed away, there was sort of this like, well, who am I to complain about, you know, this weird sort of.
What do you mean? Well,
just like I've never felt very comfortable talking about painful things, or you know, or you know, I've always felt like, well, I've always felt very lucky is really the truth of it, and I guess things have been framed in that way. So you know, I had to sort of, the way that my brain kind of takes in information is, as devastating as it was to lose my father at that age, and feel like sort of robbed of the other chapters of our life together, or you know, these future experiences that I wanted to have. I pretty quickly was sort of like reframed it as how lucky I was to have had that amount of time with him, and that it could have been even shorter, and it could have, you know, like, or I could have never known him, or you know, also being the oldest, of all the four of us kids, I had technically had the most time with him, so you know, I felt lucky in that way, you know, too. So yeah, it's I don't even know really what my point is.
Well, I do know what your point is, because it's interesting, because there are two sides of that too. So you're doing the same thing that you always do, which is like checking yourself. Like, but you are lucky because of all of these things. But at the same time, it's like you have to. You're not lucky in that sense, and it's okay not to be. Right. You know what I mean? Like you are lucky, you are. But at the same time, it's okay to have pain and feel unlucky about something. Yeah, for sure. But that was hard for you. You didn't even allow yourself to, in some way, it sounds like. Yeah, it was hard. That was hard. I mean, I also, like, you know, at that point, I still had alcohol to kind of help or not help. You know, But I it's funny. I mean, just in terms of like taking a whole bunch of all of the stories together, there was a time. So at the night of the memorial, my dad's memorial, I got incredibly drunk, and I
at a certain point, I was really wild, and I was like, my world had been turned upside down, and I was just sort of acting out. And I tried to, one of the things that I would do is climb. I've always liked climbing trees, climbing things. I always and when I would drink, sometimes my lizard brain would be like, hey, can you get up there? Let's see if you can get up there. And so I tried to climb up this building, and I broke this sign. I just grabbed onto a thing and it just broke. And the guy who owned the store was there, and I was extremely apologetic, but there was like a little bit of a conflict, and then, not a physical conflict, he just was very upset that some drunk kid broke his sign. So I gave him my ID, and I said I'd come back the next day and pay for it and all this stuff.
Wow, that was very responsible.
And the idea of just like leaving some, I broke it. I've always, responsibility was always a big thing for me. So I went in to go the next day to go pay for it. Again, this is like the day after the memorial, and I guess he had some time to look at my ID. And when I went in with my to ask him how much it was going to cost and to pay for it, he said, it's really disappointing because your dad loved this store. He used to come in here all the time. And first I was like, oh my gosh, I was humiliated, and I felt so much shame, and I was like, but also I was like, my dad's not even like 6 days gone, and you're already like, well, wherever he is, he's disappointed in you. He's looking down on you and going, wow, you really messed up. And it's just like, again, that like sort of that extra context that I couldn't just be like a drunk kid in the, but also the idea that that guy was like, now I know what you were going through, and that, not that it's an excuse to break someone's sign. It's not, but like, he definitely didn't have to twist the knife in a little bit and say,
Why would he do that? What was his?
I think I broke his sign, and that was hurtful to him, and he wanted to hurt me back. I guess, I don't know. I can't imagine saying that to somebody.
I know, I'm just trying to think. Was he trying to get money out of you or something like that?
He did get money out.
Maybe I want. Like, it seems like what? Especially, he didn't say it that night. No. He said it the next day.
Yeah.
So what? Why would he do that?
I don't know. I don't know. It was. Yeah. Also, the other weird thing was that I gave him a check, and it did sound like, I was like, really? That's how much that is going to be? But I didn't want to ask questions, and also after he said that, I just kind of wanted to get out of there. And I would drive by, and the sign never got fixed.
What? Oh.
So it also was like a reminder. I was like, oh my gosh, that's the sign that I broke. Oh, it's still not broken.
Wait, do you still see that sign? Like, do you drive by?
I think that store closed.
Where is
after
that? Is that locally?
Yeah, it's like, it's somewhere. It's like on Highland or something like that. Yeah. But it's gone now. I think the store's closed.
Well, that's a relief, because you don't need that.
No.
It's really, that is so weird that you've had these encounters with people, and it's because of, it's just the fact that your dad was famous.
Yeah, it's.
I don't mean the account. No, you would have negative encounters with people anyway.
Right, of course.
But it really raised to the next level for you.
It's strange to wield that to like hurt somebody.
Yeah.
But also, maybe he was just like, maybe he had this sort of idea of like, this little, privileged kid, or I don't know.
Yeah, he could have thought that way too.
And also, I grew up with a lot of people who I felt like that about. I was like, ew, oh my gosh, look at like people who sort of were unaware that they were just sailing through life or whatever. I would be like, oh, that's so embarrassing for you. You don't have some self-awareness that you're,
right.
So like, I've worked for everything that I've got, but I also have a BMW and I'm 16, or whatever. You're like,
yeah, that is not a good start, really, to be having a BMW at 16. I'm just saying.
No, it's not. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know about a BMW. I picked a random car.
Yes. No, I know. But what I'm saying, the point is, that's a tough way to grow up. I mean, it'd be better to have a little bit of self-awareness.
I think so. I think
just as for your adult life.
Yeah, it's less embarrassing to have a little self-awareness than go into a room and try to think you're Mr. Cool or whatever, right. And everyone's like, "Ooh, that guy was
well."
Real
I think even
gross.
I remember when just bringing it back to the beginning of when we were talking about when we were on the set of Girls. Must have been after Parenthood, right?
That was after.
But you would never know from you that you had the success that you had and that you were as well known as you were that day. Like, you didn't give off that vibe at all. In fact, I didn't even recognize you right away.
Oh, yeah.
And I was a fan of the show. Oh. And so I was sitting with, what's her name, Jenny?
Jenny Connor,
exactly. Yeah. And I remember saying, like, who's that? After I talked to you and met you. And because I didn't even know it was you when it was you. And she said, oh, it's Jason Ritter. I was just like, Jason Ritter, of course it's Jason Ritter. Oh. But again, it's that you never took what you had and kind of used it to kind of build yourself up, I don't think. Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. I think that that is a thing that, from my dad and my mom, they like, my dad, having grown up in Los Angeles, and his dad was a singing cowboy, and so he's sort of been around it, and he never took himself so seriously. He never, he would always do these sort of characters or make fun of people who thought they were really like cool and hip and, with it. And, he would make us laugh, and we would always see how inherently ridiculous that is to walk around and be like, I'm a pretty big deal, Yes.
So I think they both my parents were good at sort of being like, here are the important things in life generally, how you treat people, how your relationships with people, here are the things that are not so important,
And so now that's reminding me of the fact that you probably wouldn't want me to bring this up, and I'm going to anyway, so okay. Sorry. You were nominated for an Emmy for Parenthood, but were you the only one?
From the entire cast of Parenthood? Yes, and it's still a crime. I cannot believe that is embarrassing to me. That's
what I'm saying, because I knew once I bring this up, you're going to really not feel good about it, but it's even harder for you. Like, if they were going to do that to anyone, they should have done it to anybody else but you.
Yeah, seriously.
It's so hard. Not because you don't deserve it, but because it's so hard for you to probably deal with the fact that they're all so good, too.
Oh, yeah.
And too bad that everybody wasn't nominated, because everybody deserved it.
Every single person on that show deserved an Emmy. They all brought me to tears. It always felt 100% authentic and real and beautiful, and
how guilty did you feel then?
I felt awful.
God.
But they were so supportive and so excited. I didn't get any of any kind of weird
That's
thing.
So awesome.
They just were celebrating. It was lovely. It was really lovely. But it doesn't make any sense that out of that whole show, they were all so good. I saw Joy Bryant the other day at an audition. I was like,
oh really?
Yeah.
So she was Crosby's wife.
Yes.
I forget her name in the show. I'm gonna forget
Jasmine,
too. Jasmine, that's
yes.
right. So you wrote an audition together?
Yeah. And anytime I run into anybody from that show, it feels like, even if we didn't have a lot of scenes together or anything like that, or there's this sort of sense of we were all part of that special.
Yeah, that is very cool.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to forget her name too. What was the character's name? Lauren Graham's character?
Sarah.
Sarah, of course. So, were you for her being with Mr. Sear? Can I call you Mr. Sear?
Mr. Sear, yeah. I was for her being with Mr. Sear, especially from my point of view, but then I also, when I was watching the episodes, I thought Ray Romano did such a wonderful job on that he's such a wonderful actor. I mean, I had only really known him from the comedy world, and he's a brilliant dramatic actor, and I had no idea, and which is, just my own ignorance, but
I don't think he was out there in the world in that way at that.
Yeah, I guess not.
I agree.
Yeah, it was sort of a revelation.
It was a shock that he was on the show, I feel like.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, what? Ray Romano's coming in as like a serious guy?
Yeah, exactly.
What?
Yeah, and then, and so, to me, it made sense, and, even though it did sort of feel like a real breakup in some ways, because as a guest star, like once you get broken up with, you're out. You don't get to like hang out with the family anymore. You're not like it's just like a real breakup. You're like, but I miss what can stay the same? Nothing? But
we bonded.
Yeah, but we bonded, and I bonded with your family. I was in the Christmas picture.
Yes.
But it did make sense, and it was it was such a lovely journey, and I enjoyed the show, and and people have come up to me and they've been like, I was Team Hank, and I'm like, I understand. I'm not personally offended by that. I think in the end of the day, Sarah was also Team Hank. So
I was surprised. I did not. Wait, it's Mark, right? Mark's here.
Yeah.
I was Team Mark.
Oh, thanks.
For sure. And I was surprised that they didn't make you the final decision for her.
Wow, thank you.
I was really surprised. So they threw me off with that.
Yeah.
But they flashed forward, right? Spoiler alert.
Yeah, they had, there was like a thing where I saw her again, and by that point I had been married and I was having kids, or I had had a kid, and I thought that was such a, the show was so beautiful and such a lovely reflection of life, and there had been all of these conversations that Sarah and Mark had about children and her maybe not wanting to have anymore, and Mark saying, I don't need it, I don't need kids, I don't want kids, then I don't need them, and her being like, are you just doing that because you love me? And there was something so kind of beautifully tragic that at the end of the day, I don't think he was lying to Sarah, but I think that he was excited to have his own kid with somebody else, and so on some level Sarah's like, okay, I guess that was how that was supposed to go, and you have your life and people come in and out of it, and you try hard to make certain things work, and sometimes they don't, and people move on, and it's all painful and it's all beautiful and it's all lovely.
That's it. You so well said. Painful and beautiful. That's life.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to ask you my closing question that has two parts.
Okay, great.
All right. So the first part is, what is the image that people have of you? Who do they think Jason Ritter is?
Oh, gosh. That is a tough question. It's funny because, for a person who spends a lot of time analyzing how people see me and how I'm coming off or things like that, I'm like, oh, what is the actual final answer to that? I think people, I hope people see me as a person who is trying my best. That's what I hope, that they see that I, whoever I am to them, if I've been a positive thing in their life, if I've been a negative thing in their life, that they see that I'm constantly like a work in progress and trying to be better. I think people think, sometimes I feel like people think I am a little bit less intelligent than I am, and I think I also allow that. I think I think that, not that I'm like some secret super genius, I think... But why
would they think that?
Well, I think it's easier. I've always been sort of... I can be kind of aloof or distracted or easily pleased or surprised, or my friends have always teased me about, we'll be walking down the street and they'll go, "Where's Jason?" Oh, something shiny a few blocks back, and he's probably still there. Which is true to some degree. Maybe my ADHD, but yeah, I don't know. I always feel like people can think whatever they want to think.
Yeah.
And I don't feel the need to try to prove myself to people.
So the second half of the question, we really talked about the whole time, but I'll just say it anyway. So who do you see, or like, what do you see yourself as? Who do you, wait, I don't usually say it in that way, but I changed it for you for some reason. I'm just gonna, so I want to find the way that I had it, that I was going to say it. So how do you see yourself?
How do I see myself? Gosh. I see myself as a bit more of a recluse than I think most people would imagine. I see myself as also as somebody who's trying, and I think the reason that I hope people see that is because it's really true to me. I really am always trying to figure out how to interact with people in a better way, or be, do less damage and do more good. But I have some serious anxieties and things. Like I run away a lot. I feel like less though now than I used to. God, those are two really hard to answer questions.
I know they are. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stump you, but they're interesting.
They are
aren't
interesting.
They?
Yeah, it's really interesting to sort of go from the inside to the outside. And
right, it's interesting the progression of the two now that you've mentioned that.
Yeah, it's like, what do you, if we were both looking in a mirror, how do I look to you versus what I see? Because I also can see my whole life and my memories and my, everything that I've attempted to do, or things like that. But yeah, gosh, that is a really good question. I'm going to be thinking about that all day.
I'm sure you will be.
I will. Oh gosh, what do people see me like?
But I do think that you just spent the whole time really answering that second part of the question.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So mission accomplished.
That's who I am.
You met your potential.
Oh, thank you. Yes, finally. After all these years, today is the day.
Jason, thank you so much.
That was Jason Ritter. I knew I'd like getting to know him better. Good guy. Go watch our YouTube video. Simply open up YouTube and search for Really Famous. My trip to LA continues to unfold, so please stick around. Oh, and question. Do you stay till the very end of every episode of Really Famous? I often plant a little treat for you at the very end after I close the show. So please tell me if you stay tuned, or if you didn't even realize that they're there. I'm curious. Send me an email, please. reallyfamouspodcast@gmail.com. Finally, thank you to Jamie, Bob, and Pat, my Patreon supporters. I appreciate your generosity and support so very much. I'm Kara Mayer Robinson. Thank you for listening to Really Famous. Here's one of those planted surprises.
What's your favorite show?
My favorite show, of all time?
Yeah, of all time, exactly.
Oh gosh, I don't know why I said that. That just widened
that makes it so hard.
yeah. But I really enjoyed Buying Time. What did I really enjoy? My favorite show is The Wire. I haven't seen The Wire. I know that I should have seen The Wire by this point. But it probably will be my favorite show when I see it. That's what I hear happens.
That's what I hear too.
Yeah, you haven't seen it either?
No, I did. I tried. This show I tried.
Okay.
3 different times.
Oh, really?
Because it was recommended so highly by people who I so respect.
Yeah, it's the greatest show of all time. That's what
they say.
Yeah.
But I tried so hard. It didn't. I couldn't do it.
No. I'll say it. I figured it out. One of my favorite shows, and I don't care what people say, is Lost.
Yes, I'm with you.
And I know that people were like, it didn't all make sense. It was such a fun journey, and the characters were so great. And sometimes I still sit around and I go, I wonder what Jack and Sawyer and Kate are all doing right now, and Hurley. Where are they? I mean, they're in heaven.
Hurley's in the van, I feel like. Driving somewhere
true.
Uncontrollable with the van.
Yeah.
But I would definitely like to revisit everyone, and it was brilliantly done.
Yeah. So well acted.
Right. Maybe
so
not
fun.
everything about it was perfect, but the flaws make it more beautiful.
Exactly.
Lost.
Like we talked about.
Perfect. Perfect. Thanks, Jason.
Absolutely.